There's a phrase that I use on this channel, and I hear other people referring to it also, and that is the free-spirited leader. And often it's misunderstood because free-spirited doesn't mean unstructured, it doesn't mean frazzled, it doesn't mean disengaged, and it certainly does not mean unaccountable. In fact, some of the most effective leaders I've worked with, these are the ones running complex organizations, they are deeply, deeply free-spirited. And their freedom doesn't come from avoiding responsibility, it comes from how they relate to it. And that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm Ebony Adams Monk, leadership guide, former corporate executive and expat, and student of wisdom traditions from around the world. And after leading teams and navigating major transformations in corporations, I created this channel to help free-spirited leaders who refuse to choose between ambition and freedom to create a life, a career, and an organization that feels aligned and free. Our goal here is to make sure you lead with wisdom and joy, not with stress. So if that resonates with you, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're notified when I post a new video. Now let's get to it. So when I say free-spirited leader, I'm not talking about personality. I'm talking about an inner posture, an inner power. A free-spirited leader is someone who leads from alignment, not obligation. They have a sense of clarity, not pressure. And they lead from choice rather than survival. They still operate within the structure. They still deliver results, but they're not internally trapped by the systems and the framework in which they lead. That distinction matters, especially right now, because organizations are operating under sustained pressure, not just a temporary disruption. So what I see again and again across industries, across seniority levels, they're leaders who are outwardly successful, but inwardly constrained. For example, I'll meet a senior leader who technically has influence. They are a respected voice in the room, strong track record. But when we talk privately, she or he will say things like, I don't actually feel like I have room to think. Or every decision feels urgent. Or even when it shouldn't. Or I'm responsible for everything, but I don't feel like I'm in control of anything. They're carrying responsibility without spaciousness. Decision-making without relief, and sometimes authority without real agency. And when leaders feel trapped internally, a few things happen. They become reactive instead of responsive. They over-control instead of trust. They lose access to creativity and their long-range thinking, their ability to see patterns. And from an organizational standpoint, this is where culture quietly tightens. This is important because a leader who feels internally trapped doesn't just suffer personally. That state gets transmitted throughout the organization. You see it when meetings become very cautious and they're no longer creative. When leaders stop talking about what they really see because it feels safer to just stay aligned than to be honest. When decisions get made, but no one really feels ownership once they leave the room. Slower decision making, risk aversion, and people just not being innovative. Teams just waiting. I'll just wait for direction and for them to tell me what to do. Right? I've seen high-performing organizations stall, not because of market forces, but because the leaders had no internal room left to actually lead. And when leaders don't experience agency in their own roles, they unintentionally recreate that constraint for other people. And that's how culture tightens. It's through accumulated pressure that never gets released. And freedom in this sense isn't a lifestyle preference, it becomes about leadership capacity. The leaders who sustain impact over time are not choosing between structure and soul, they integrate them. They build systems that support human rhythm. They design roles that allow discretion and discernment and understand that true clarity and real leadership doesn't come from pressure, it comes from grounding. This becomes the point where leadership is less about force and it's more about calibration. Think rhythm, more about rhythm. So when leaders ask me how to reclaim that sense of freedom without blowing up their responsibilities, I usually bring it back to 3 areas. Environment, so where you lead from matters. Your physical environment, the culture of that environment, the emotional environment, how people are supported, that becomes important. 2 is the schedule, or think of this as rhythm. How full is the schedule? What is your rhythm? How intentional is it? Where are you deciding and being responsive versus reacting? And then the 3rd is identity. Who are you being in the role? And what parts of you have been edited out to make leadership feel more accessible and acceptable versus how much is actually being empowered so that you show up strongly. Freedom returns when leaders reintegrate themselves, thinking about those 3 areas. For me, this became undeniable, and I see it time and time again. But when I worked abroad, it was a completely different culture, changed environments, it changed how I led. And in many ways, I had more clarity, more discernment because of the culture, a little bit room to flex. And I wasn't leading against myself, I was playing into my strengths. That shift made me a more effective executive, not less serious. And so what I want to offer you is this reframe. Your leadership does not expand by becoming tighter or more constrained. Think about a leader who goes to work in a different organization. Many times they become more expansive, and that expansiveness supports your inner clarity. And when your inner world has space, your leadership gains range. Your leadership expands, and when that happens, your life expands. That's the connection. There is, in West Africa, the calabash or the gourd, the vessel that carries water and grains. And the calabash itself isn't the value. The value comes from its capacity, what it can hold, and how well it's cared for. When a calabash is cracked or overfilled or never set down, it doesn't matter how precious what you try to pour into it, something will spill, something will be lost. And leadership works the same way. When leaders are outwardly powerful but inwardly constrained, their capacity shrinks, even if their title doesn't. They're still carrying the work, the people, the responsibility, but without enough internal room to hold it well. A free-spirited leader isn't unstructured. They're resourced. They know that the vessel matters. A free-spirited leader designs his or her environment, her rhythms, her identity so that leadership has space. Her leadership has space, not just pressure. Because when a leader expands her capacity, the organization feels it. Decisions move, there's more creativity and innovation. People feel like they can breathe and they perform better. So if this resonates, here's the question I'll leave with you. Where has your leadership vessel grown smaller, not from lack of skill, but from lack of space? And what would it look like to tend the calabash, not as a luxury, but as a responsibility for your leadership? Because when your leadership expands, your life does too. Whew. If this conversation resonates, you're welcome to subscribe. Share with the leader who might need permission to create more space. And if you're interested in learning more about your leadership archetype and how I think about leadership, I'll link a quiz, an archetype quiz, in the comments or in the description. It is 10 short questions. And once you answer the questions, immediately you receive some information about your leadership style, how it works for you, how to tend to it and nurture it so that you can strengthen it and bring out more of what makes your leadership really tick and work. It's a really good way, a quick way for you just to learn a little bit more deeply about your leadership style, but from the perspective of wisdom traditions. And when you take that, you get onto my email list and you get to get more tips and information about me and leadership and how it shows up for you. If this resonates, stay with me. This channel is for leaders who know they don't need less responsibility. They just need more room to carry it wisely. Until next time.